Senator Minchin.
Thank you very much, Mr Acting Deputy President. The 30th of June will, in my case, bring to an end not just 18 years in the Senate, but 32 years of full-time involvement in politics. Unusually for the Conservative side of politics, I've spent virtually all my working life serving the Liberal cause, rather than perhaps more sensibly pursuing a career in the profession for which I was trained, the law. My 18 years in this place were preceded by 14 years serving as a full-time professional officer in the Liberal Party at both the state and federal level, which I must say was superb training for my years of service in the Senate. The transition I made from the Liberal Party's professional wing to the Parliament is also not common. I remain only the second Liberal Party State Director after John Carrick in the history of our party to serve in the Senate. I do note with pleasure that former State Directors David Kemp, Petro Georgiou and Scott Morrison have made the transition to the House of Representatives, serving there with great distinction. It has, of course, been an enormous privilege to represent my state and my party in this place for almost one-third of my life. One of the British parliamentarians I most admire, Enoch Powell, wrote in his biography of Joseph Chamberlain that, and I quote, "All political lives, unless they are cut off in midstream at a happy juncture, end in failure, because that is the nature of politics and of human affairs." There is regrettably much truth in that maxim, which is why I'm retiring now while the going's good, in the hope that it's only my political enemies who will claim it applies to me. I have been extraordinarily fortunate to have enjoyed a political life that has enabled me to serve at the highest levels of government available to a senator. Unburdened by the levels of ego and ambition which weigh heavily upon so many of our colleagues in the other place, I've instead been the beneficiary of chance, luck and being in the right place at the right time. Entering the Senate in 1993 in the shadow of such political luminaries as my SA colleagues Robert Hill, Amanda Vanstone, Alexander Downer and Ian McLaughlin, I happily resigned myself to a backbench career, feeling privileged indeed to even be here. A series of fortunate circumstances gave me the opportunity, after just 9 months, to rise to the front bench as a shadow parliamentary secretary in opposition, and then to serve as a parliamentary secretary, junior minister, cabinet minister, deputy leader and leader of the government in the Senate, and finally opposition leader in the Senate. So I've spent 16 of my 18 years on the coalition front bench, including 9 years in the cabinet. I remain surprised by the opportunities I've had, none of which, frankly, I expected. Political life is, of course, a balance sheet, and while I hope history will judge mine as having a plus sign at the bottom, some may well judge that the positives and the negatives are fairly evenly balanced. On the positive side of the ledger, I must say I'm delighted to have been able to serve in one of the best ministries in government, that of Finance, for 6 years, making me the longest serving of Australia's 11 finance ministers. Fortuitously, I'm also the only one whose every budget produced a surplus. I hasten to note that I lay no claim whatsoever to being the best. That honour rightfully belongs to Peter Walsh, the Labor identity whom I most admire and who is a great Australian. Having been the first South Australian to serve in the finance portfolio, I am pleased that another South Australian senator, albeit a representative of the ALP, currently serves in that role. And I bet Senator Wong is very glad she's no longer looking after climate change. The Finance Minister and the Treasurer are, in any cabinet, the only true representatives of the taxpayer. Together they must fight an often lonely battle against the ravages of the spending ministers, from the Prime Minister down. And I'm sure Senator Wong knows what I'm talking about. It was a privilege to fight alongside that greatest of treasurers, Peter Costello, in that battle to protect the taxpayers. Together we produced those 6 consecutive surpluses, totalling almost $82 billion. We eliminated government debt and, very importantly, established the Future Fund with sufficient resources to meet the government's substantial unfunded superannuation liabilities. I had Peter Costello's strong support in one of my toughest challenges, the sale of the government's remaining 50% shareholding in Telstra, which, in a process known as T3, completed the privatisation of Telstra. I don't wish to be partisan at all today, but I have to say I'm a little disappointed to see taxpayers now being forced back into being the owners and operators of a telecommunications business, having worked so hard to get them out of it. I do earnestly hope for the nation's sake that Senator Conroy actually knows what he's doing. It's been my privilege to be the first and only South Australian to serve in the industry portfolio, which at the time I held it also entailed responsibility for science and resources and energy. I had 3 years in that mega portfolio, which only existed for the 3 years I held it. After it nearly killed me, I recommended it be broken up, a recommendation the Prime Minister sensibly accepted. That portfolio, among many other things, made me the only Commonwealth Minister ever to have had responsibility for the whole nuclear fuel cycle, from uranium mining to our only nuclear reactor to radioactive waste management. So during that exciting 3 years, I approved the Beverley uranium mine in my home state of South Australia. I commissioned a replacement nuclear research reactor at Lucas Heights, and it was my job to identify the central north of South Australia as the site for a national radioactive waste repository. All somewhat controversial decisions. I have often wondered why some on the left show such hostility to me, but I think it does derive from that period. The left has regrettably allowed radioactivity to blind them to the compassionate and sensitive side of my character.